What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale, coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, who is ecstatic to know that the podcast is back on Apple after it was not distributed one of the days this week. Hashtag that sucks. We are on to our NBA Eastern Conference record projections / over-under picks. Discord, we've seen people asking. I will figure out a way. I'll set up a Google Doc. You can participate in this and use the same over-unders that Grant and I are using so that we can see who does better. The winner, we'll give the winner if they beat us by a lot, or anyone who just wins it. We'll figure out something to do with that. Very quickly, subscribe if you haven't already. You know the deal. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, those are the best platforms to help us on. Ratings, reviews, Apple, Spotify, those help out a ton as well. If you have done those things, you can do things like join our Discord, because that's how you could participate in the over-under exercise. I'm worried if I put it on YouTube or Twitter, we'll just have an overload of submissions, which would be great. But go join the Discord, and then you could just have the link there, and you'll be able to submit your wins. And I'm probably going to make it a little bit more in detailed than I would if I was just making it public and handing out a form. Follow us on the socials. Those are up on the screen or in the YouTube and pod descriptions. Tell people about us. Recommend us. You could retweet our promos on Twitter a bunch, knowing that we don't pay for Twitter, so our tweets are going to get buried. So juice up the algorithm a little bit for us. And you can buy our merch. That is in the podcast and YouTube link as well. Neither of us are. That's 2 podcasts in a row, Grant. I'm not wearing HardwoodKnocks merch. I
still have the coffee cup behind me.
I have a thermos that has a bunch of HardwoodKnocks stickers on it.
There you go.
So I'm going to count that. And it's got caffeine, which is very on brand for HardwoodKnocks. And that's it. That's me just ass backwardsing my way through that intro. I'm very off kilter for some reason. Grant, how are you doing since we last spoke about like 3 or 4 minutes ago?
Pretty good. I'm glad that you took my advice to just call Apple and say, yes, hello, I'd like to speak to the podcast department. They have a grievance I'd like to air, and they just handled it.
Is it even I did nothing, by the way. I published the Western Conference over-unders, and luckily the other podcast went live with it. So that'll do like no downloads, which great for us. And that sweet ad revenue we will never see. But so if you even wanted to, like, is there even, I had to find out a support email. Like I couldn't even figure out, like, it was just, and they I was looking on their website for creators, and they're redirecting me to all these pages that just have advice without any well, fill out this form if there's an issue or something. It was just, It was a nightmare. So hopefully it doesn't happen again, because I know from the statistics, I was going to say, I guess, I was like, no, we know from the stats that most of our listeners still use Apple Podcasts. So we're back. It was a short hiatus. We back.
I just really like the idea. I don't know why it's such a funny thing to me, the idea of someone calling Apple as if Apple is like a single building somewhere with like just someone sitting at a reception desk answering a phone. This is Dan. My podcast didn't go up. So right away, sir. I will go get it.
I wish that we were still recording when you did this yesterday, because your delivery, everyone, Grant was basically like this. I told him that our podcast didn't go out on Apple, and he was like, well, Dan, you know what you do? You just call Apple. They'll fix it for you. So I wish we had that on the recording, but we do not. So you'll just have to believe it from Grant's lips to your ears and the reenactment of it. Eastern Conference over-unders, assuming this gets published. Yeah. Are you ready to dive into them? I'm excited to go 15-0 on the over-unders.
Yeah, me too. It'll be awesome, especially since we went 15-0. Even though we had different picks, so I don't know how it's gonna work out. But on the West, we just hitting shots on all 15. So let's keep it rolling.
And we will keep it rolling with alphabetical order. Always dangerous on this podcast to say we're going to do this, but we're going to try. The Atlanta Hawks, their over-under is set at 41.5. Grant, where are you at with them?
I got to say that has always struck me, because I was more aware of the East lines ahead of time than the West lines, because I, for some reason, did this for the East like several weeks ago and have since gone back to update it. That always seemed like one of the just jumped out as too low. So I have the Hawks at 44 wins. I think honestly, most of it is the Quinn Snyder effect. I just believe that he's one of the better coaches in the league. And I believe that if somebody is going to get the Hawks back to the status of, if you have Trae Young, you've got a top 5 offense, and will just defend enough. So I 44, we're adding, we're going relative to some of these other teams, like quite a bit over this number for me. But I feel comfortable with it. Like, and that's not even to, you can maybe speak to this too, but this is a roster that, in addition to some, young and DeJounte Murray and Clint Capella, like established guys, Bogdanovich, there's like a decent number of players at key positions that just are at ages where they should get better. Okongwu, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson. Like, there's just all these guys that I think it's reasonable to expect them to get a little bit better. And so I'm not making some huge jump, but I feel pretty good about the over here in 44 wins.
I don't know that I feel good about it. I went with 43 wins just because I don't understand what this team is necessarily doing. I understand how Quinn Snyder should add a few wins. I understand that the offense is going to be terrific, even if the shot profile doesn't change. It probably will change. It did not change a ton after he took over, but it was midseason. He was barely even there. And I would hope that the DeJounte Murray's better defensively, but I don't know what this team can or is defensively. And then their combo forward rotation makes me very nervous. And there's still, look, the big thing here that I do think will determine a lot of their win-loss ceiling, just the DeJounte Murray minutes without Trae Young ended up not being great last year. And so I am banking on those getting better, but like there are some wild cards here too. I don't know. I can't remember if you mentioned it, but like they're going to really lean on Jalen Johnson this year after getting rid of John Collins. Like that's an expectation. Does AJ Griffin get run? It seems like he still might be on kind of a short, short runway. And like, will Bogey stay healthy? That's kind of the other thing here. And what will DeAndre Hunter be? That is just like, have you watched more of a player and have less of a feel for what they're supposed to like be at this point than him? He's certainly in that category. And there's also, it goes both ways. There's the potential for, it just feels like Clint Capella is going to eventually be on the Mavericks. Like once they figure out that Derek Lively can't be like the go-to center right away. And then it's also what they were involved in Pascal Siakam. So do they have that type of move in them? Does that make them better? Do they go the other direction if they get off on the wrong foot? And it's like, we got Onyeka Okongwu's extension that we haven't signed him to yet. His next deal is coming up. We're just going to get rid of Clint Capella and like we're probably getting an expiring contract back. I don't feel great about it, but I do expect this team to be better. How's that for a ringing endorsement of the over?
Yeah, I think we're on similar footing. We didn't mention Saddiq Bey, who actually was like basically never better than he was coming off the bench and starting a little bit after he was traded from the Pistons to the Jazz last year. I mean, the Hawks. He shot 40% from three. I don't know how sustainable that is, but he's 36.1 for his career. And like, just as someone that you don't, he's started pretty much his entire career with the Pistons. So like, if you don't need him to be a starter and he's just kind of a luxury second unit guy, I think Snyder, really, I keep coming back to Snyder, I think, and maybe that's just an oversimplification, but I think there's enough talent here. And I do think they're much more likely to add to that than to start selling parts off. That's just not the way that this roster or the cap sheet is structured for them. I think there's more upside than downside here, really, unless you have some catastrophe where Trae Young is asking out or something crazy like that, which I don't really foresee.
Do you want to move on to the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, this will be interesting.
They are set at 54.5. We've not done the look ahead, so I don't know what it bumped up from after the Jrue Holiday trade, but I'm assuming it went up at least a little bit from there. Where are you at with them?
I had this as an over before Holiday happened. So I had him at like 50. I think I had him at 56 and I've moved it to 58, which sounds like a lot. I'm pretty sure it's definitely the highest win total I have for any team in either conference, but it's also just one win better than they had last year. So, I mean, we've talked about the Celtics plenty. It's very much in the national discourse. Their top six are ridiculously good. It's the best top six players in the league. That's much more of like a postseason feature than a regular season thing. And depth is a concern for them. I think it's fair to say, as is injury. But I think this team is going to be able to have three really, really good NBA, plus starters on the floor all the time. And sometimes they'll be all five. And sometimes, if they only go 8 deep, they'll just basically be populating the rotation with guys that are, better than their matchup almost every night. So I think I'm curious what you think about the depth concerns, if maybe those are overblown, but I definitely feel really good about the over. 58 wins might be a little bit too high, but clearing 54.5, I don't think that's an issue.
Oh, I have them at 52.
Okay.
And this might be an instance of was I just ripping wins from everybody? Because I finished, when I first went through my records, I finished with 50 too many wins, like for the entire league. That's how I did the record projections. I'm also just, the top six is incredible. How much will this team be invested in the regular season? How much will this team experiment during the regular season? Because they need to find out, okay, well, who are our seventh and eighth and ninth most bankable guys? Because you need them to eat innings during the regular season. Like, you do need the top six is good for the playoff team. But it'd be nice to have like a seventh. Is that Peyton Pritchard? Is it Sam Hauser? Is it someone that we're just not even mentioning right now? Is that they have another move in them too, which might be a vote in confidence of the over. It feels like a lot of churn without a clear, and you already mentioned the injury downside risk, which I think it was interesting that they looked at last year's roster, and I promise this will add to your point. And they decided, based off the strength and weaknesses of what they did, they needed just as much injury downside, net neutral playmaking, and then still less defensive versatility. Just looking at who left in R-Dub, in Grant Williams as well. And like, his departure's kind of been lost in the shuffle because he got buried in the rotation at one point, and just so much other stuff has happened in Boston. Kristaps Porzingis might be the best, like drop coverage rim protector outside of Brook Lopez, if you want to call him that. But and I don't want to downplay what he did last year. It was a career year in which he missed fewer than 20 games for just the second time since 2016, 2017. And by the way, his mega accomplishment was leading the Washington 35 wins to the 12th seed. Like, can we bank on this guy to be in a smaller role, be available, and then just be as impact? He shot 60+% on like fadeaway jumpers last year. It's just, I understand, okay, yeah, he can punish mismatches in a way that we couldn't before. We were never really going to do that with Marcus Smart to begin with. And now we have Jrue Holiday to offset that. And Jrue Holiday was probably better. He was probably better than Marcus Smart at both ends, the playoffs notwithstanding, when you look at Jrue Holiday's jumper. It's just, I just have so many questions, and I still don't necessarily understand the theory of this team. I understand a lot more after the Jrue Holiday edition, but don't you see a combustibility? And by the way, Al Horford's just older. Like that, like that kind of matters. And finally, I'm sorry to drag this one out. I have so many opinions on this team, though. Did you see the video? I think it was Day posted of Jalen Brown dribbling with his left hand.
Yeah.
That thing was about as tight as the runtime on any Martin Scorsese movie ever. Like, it was just, I'm not trying to criticize that. This is a really good basketball team, and they might be my pick to come out of the East. I haven't settled on one yet. Like, I'm more decided on the West right now, but the regular season feels like it could be experimental, maybe laden with a little bit more downside than the top six in name and talent and stature suggest.
For sure. I acknowledge the downside. I think that's very real. And for me to say 58 wins is, I think it's a bet on Porzingis not necessarily being what he was last year, but staying that healthy and really excelling in this role. And I think it's also maybe a little bit of a bet on Jason Tatum getting better, which is, he's at a point in his career where that's plausible. I think Derek White is another guy that, even he's, not like on Tatum's trajectory or anything close to it, but I think he could be better. I think Holiday will probably be asked to do less on offense than he was in Milwaukee. And so I think that helps. But yeah, like all that falls apart with the depth and injury issue. So the downside for this team is for sure there. I just think I just needed, I don't know, I was starting to go crazy doing all these and thinking like, am I going to pick anybody to have like 55 plus? It wasn't happening. And we tend to get a few of those every year. I just was looking for one. I think Boston's a decent pick for that.
What do we have? We had 255 plus win teams last year. Was it Denver and didn't Denver only hit 53 last year?
Yeah, they did. So you had Milwaukee at 58 last year, Boston 57, Philly 54, Denver 53, Cleveland and Memphis both at 51. So, I mean,
there were still 255. You were right. Your point. You were right. There's always a couple teams.
There's a couple generally. Yeah. I mean, that's, there's the first time for everything, or I'm sure it's happened in the recent past and we're just forgetting, but I needed a team over 55. And I spoiler alert, I got a couple more, but
a couple.
We can move on.
Ooh, that excites me. I'm assuming it's not this next team though. The Brooklyn Nets with an over under of 37.5. Please take it away.
This is another. Have I done 3 straight overs? Yeah, I have. This is an over for me. I have them at 41 and 41. So just the 500 season, which will be worse than they finished last year, but that's because they were just a completely different team prior to blowing it up. And then they were 11 and 13. I think I have it after the All-Star break with mostly this team. That feels about right. I guess I'm predicting they'll be slightly better than that. Just, 1 or 2 wins better, and just, they'll win as often as they lose. I think it's fair to expect Mikal Bridges to actually, well, I hate to say this, but like struggle a little more in the bigger role than he, he was just immediately after that trade last year. It was, we had to start wondering, is this guy going to be a number 1 option on a good team? I think there may be a little pullback from there. Ben Simmons is a big question mark, although really, like, since he gave the team nothing last year, if he does anything, it might be positive. I don't know. There's just a lot of good NBA players. I like Cam Johnson. I think we both love Nick Claxton on defense. I think that sets their defensive floor pretty high. If you throw in DFS and Royce O'Neal and Bridges, like, this should be a good defense, I think, if they have their best guys on the floor. And just finding enough playmaking and scoring is going to be the issue. And so that's why I have them basically as a break-even team.
They're fascinating to me. Mikal Bridges was great. They still had a below-average offense when he was on the court for the regular season stint. And they don't have a ton of playmaking on that. There's Spencer Dinwiddie. Maybe you believe Mikal Bridges will make a jump. I get the Ben Simmons intrigue, but aren't we kind of at the point where we need to see it outside of the empty gym Instagram videos to believe it? Yeah. And that's just, I'm not even trying to be mean. No. And they can space the floor, run a bunch of different units. If they want to get out in transition, that could be great. I just can't. I'm at 37 wins for this team, so it's an under. And I just can't shake this feeling that they're going to be mediocre to slightly worse enough that they look at kind of pivoting in another direction. Because right now they're sort of just trapped in this weird space of, no, they're not rebuilding and they're kind of trying to win, but their ceiling is still maybe 6th in the East, like the absolute best case outcome. And I think it's more likely, this isn't spicy, that they're not going to use their draft or pick equity to go out and acquire someone else. It's more likely that they start selling off parts.
Yeah, I think, you have Bridges and Claxton and Cam Johnson as kind of these guys are going to be here, core. And then everybody else, Dorian Finney-Smith can help any team, which means he's great for the Nets, but also that he's a valuable piece to trade. If it's like nobody else feels like a real permanent fixture here. I am intrigued though, as just looking at the depth chart. Imagine this team, I don't know how they would score, but you could put Dennis Smith Jr., Bridges, Finney-Smith, either Simmons or Royce O'Neal and Claxton on the floor. Like, that's a great defensive lineup. This team will have an identity, I think, and it's going to be that there will be stretches where they are impossible to score on. And I don't know that they have enough to, on the other end to really make that count. But I think there are lineups this team can put out there that will just guard the shit out of the ball, that will be really, really good on D.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, how worried though are you about like that half court table setting element?
Extremely worried, because the lineup I just said had Bridges is the primary playmaker, unless Ben Simmons, can be that. Which let's just assume that's not possible until we see it proven. Because Dennis Smith Jr. is not a good offensive point guard at all. He's just one of the best on-ball defenders at that position. So if you have him out there, you've got to have multiple playmakers at other spots, and the Nets really don't have that.
The next team on our docket is oh my God, I lost my space in the thing. It's the Charlotte Hornets, though, so I can at least remember the alphabet a little bit. Their over-under is set at 30.5. Grant, where are you at with them?
This makes me so uncomfortable because I have them over by a lot. Yeah, so I have Charlotte at 40 wins. And a lot of that has to do with, 39 and 43 a couple years ago when LaMelo was an all-star and Miles Bridges had the big step forward. And I just don't really see why they can't come close to that. Assuming Ball is as good or better as he was, which, risky, I guess. And Bridges is, something close to what he was before the season he missed. I don't love their centers. I think the Nick Richards, Mark Williams combo is kind of like, they were a fun story down the stretch for a team that like didn't have a lot going. They found these guys and they're on the cheap. And what did they extend both of them? Is that right? Or at least they extended Richards, or Richards got a new deal. I just think this is another team kind of like Brooklyn that's going to be close to 500. I think the offense could be really good. I think the defense, if the two bigs, make steps forward like you'd expect second year young guys to do. Still PJ Washington, there's enough talent here that, I'm not saying they're, I guess I have them by virtue of winning 40 games, 11th in the East. So nothing crazy, but, I think 30, maybe you can speak to this. Like, what's the scenario where they win 30 games and go under? It just seems like that's not what this team is trying to do or how they operated over the offseason either.
Yeah, and I think they got 27 victories last year, and LaMelo missed most of the season. Cody Martin only played in 7 games. They were without Miles Bridges. Now you have Mark Williams, a little bit more experienced, but I have them at 31, so it's an over, but it's a slight over for me. It's just like, what? Like, LaMelo could still get it. Like, there's still injury downside to this team, as there is with every team, but I think there's more just based on LaMelo's lower body track record. You're going to be reliant at some point on Brandon Miller to do a lot to see what you have in him. That could be good, but is it going to add wins? Gordon Hayward's in a contract year. Do you look at moving him? What does the center rotation look like? You have Mark Williams there. How much are you leaning on him in year 2? I would assume a lot. And as you mentioned, you already have Nick Richards. The front court is interesting, but how does the Miles Bridges, who still has to serve, I think 10 games left on his suspension for pleading no contest to felony domestic violence charge, he's in a contract year where he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Does that impact what's going on with this team at all? And look, there's a new majority ownership regime here. And while I don't think that they're going to trade LaMelo or something, and they're not good enough to say we need to tear it down to the studs, but isn't this kind of a team that could be someone would take Terry Rozier, or we can take back bad money for Gordon Hayward? That's, it's going to go a little bit further out than just this season. Maybe I'm throwing that in there. I do wonder too, a big part of what intrigued me about them last year was that sort of defensive rise in the latter half of the season. Steve Clifford is still there. They'll do all the Steve Clifford things. I think it's going to come to a head where he's still allowing them to play fast, but with LaMelo more available, Miles Bridges more available, you're going to continue to play fast. I think that's going to be a drain on your defensive ceiling, ultimately, even if you don't think Miles Bridges is a net negative defensive player. And LaMelo could get better there too. They do feel like a team, best case outcome, that they could really blow away this over-under. And so maybe I'm sort of adhering to the over-under itself a little too much, but there's a lot of, I should say, possibly good or almost good teams in the middle of the East. This isn't one of them to me. And maybe I'm just missing there.
No, I think we kind of view them similarly because, again, I have them 11th, so not even in the play-in. Maybe this is an unfair thing to ask, but this team won 39 games 2 years ago. So what is different now? If we assume that the guys that contributed to that are healthy and can play at that level, there's some turnover. I got to pull up I guess you had some different pieces in there. I think Devontae Graham was still there maybe. And you had Malik Monk, you had Cody Zeller. There's guys that were there that aren't there now. But it's not like we're talking about none of those guys were starters. So yeah, I guess maybe I just kind of see that team. Or something.
I get that. It's just, what is the guarantee? How many players provide assurances of we are going to be this good on this roster? There's LaMelo.
Which that's not even an assurance, right?
I would say PJ. Well, but that's an availability thing. I think there's LaMelo. There's PJ Washington for sure, who I still think is pretty underrated.
Yeah.
And then there's who? What are you expecting from Miles Bridges after not playing for over a year? Just the lack of certainty, because Gordon Hayward, the availability stuff, he's getting older. Terry Rozier, he should probably be better this year when he doesn't have to do as much on the ball. But it's when you really get into their secondary rotation, does Cody Martin have a bounce back year? Are they testing out Nick Smith Jr. at all? Are you counting on, I know you extended Nick Richards, but how many minutes a game and then I'm just assuming Brandon Miller is going to feature prominently into all of this at some point, if not immediately. And do you trade people to ensure that runway exists for him. So I have a feeling it might be too low on this roster, but again, I had them when I first went through it. I had them at like 34 or 35. Like I said, I was ripping wins from everybody.
That's probably where we should be, right? We should both be around there because we're like 10 apart or 9 apart. But I'm gonna stay. I think it'll be interesting to track this one because I buy your logic across the board. So I can't really argue.
That was a lot of Charlotte Hornets talk.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Chicago Bulls. Their over under is set at 37.5. Grant, what did you choose?
That also just feels low to me. So I'm going over again. I gotta just get some wins knocked off somewhere. And as I look down the list, it's not coming soon. I got the Bulls at 42-40. So 42 wins, another like pretty comfortably over this figure. What did they win 40 last year? I guess you would cite to go under here and win 37 games. I guess you're assuming worse health. None of the young guys get better. Patrick Williams, Kobe White. I'm not looking at the roster right now, but I'm just trying to think of. I'm sure I'm missing more than one that would fall into that category. It's just, and this is not a team that is interested in starting over. They just re-signed Vucevic. They did not trade DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine. Maybe a DeRozan trade is how this goes under at some point during the season. Ayo Dosunmu was another young guy. They added Javon Carter. They already have Alex Caruso. Like this backcourt defense should be like pretty nasty. So yeah, I'm going over again. Not saying the Bulls are going to be great, but slightly above 542 wins doesn't seem crazy to me.
I went over as well. I have them at 40. I don't know that I have anything to add to what you said other than I guess the two factors would be, is this the year that they just undo it all? And the fact that they re-signed Nikola Vucevic just seems to suggest that no, it is right. It is not. And so the other thing would be, okay, has the defensive magic run out? Because they're very much, I don't want to say it is unique, but like they're very much built on what they do from the outside in for the most part. But you also have the personnel to float that when you have Ayo Dosunmu. I don't know why I mentioned him first, but Alex Caruso, Javon Carter, and Patrick Williams. I thought he made a lot of strides, especially away from the ball. So when you're talking about someone rotating as like a lower guy out of the corner, now you sort of have that element of it. So will they be just as good defensively? I do not know, but I don't think I buy into the fact that, okay, like there was, probably some luck caked into there, but this is not a dumpster fire defensively. If you said they'll be a top 10 defense, that feels reasonable to say. You have questions about their offense. Does DeMar DeRozan pull back at all in the clutch? Like he's had otherworldly shot making in those moments. I do not know. Is there some sort of aging curve for Nick Vucevic? Zach LaVine was quietly spectacular for just most of last season
and trended up, right? Like he got better as the season went on. So that's another. I would they were
healthy now, right? It isn't like
they had a 44 win point differential last year. So to go under here, you're knocking off 7 wins from that with basically the same personnel. I mean, eventually this thing will go bad, but this is like the quintessential mediocre team to me. And I think they're just like the range of outcomes for them is really narrow. It feels like they're not going to win, 49 or 50, but I like lose it or winning 37 or fewer just also does not feel very likely to me.
I don't even know how you could have, unless you're just saying, hey, the trade thing. That just boiled down to me. That would bring us to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I know we are both high on, but your lead into this podcast suggests that you might be higher on them than I am. Their over-under is set at 50.5. What did you go with them?
55. I think I think I've been kind of gradually coming around to, and probably on this podcast, reiterating the idea that I think the East has 3 really, really good teams. And Cleveland is the third of those after Boston and Milwaukee. And then the Sixers kind of start another tier for me. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the Sixers? They'll be an interesting one to get to here. Darius Garland should be better. And he's already great. Evan Mobley should be better. You had him, you picked him as defensive player of the year and he finished second, I think. So moving up from that status that's how you get to 55 wins. And then we have spent so much time talking about how that 5th starter, that small forward, was maybe the biggest, most conspicuous roster hole any team had in the league, and they filled it with Max Strus. And they added George Niang for more shooting to space the floor. So all the shit that, cost them against the Knicks is less likely to cost them again. That's a playoff concern, but it matters in the regular season. So 55 wins. I think this team is just really good, and they've already proved they can be an awesome regular season team. I'm just kind of anticipating slight improvement really over what they've been.
I'm still trying to find another win in my thing to add to this team. I have them at 53. Yeah. So it's an easy over for me. Mm-hmm. They're just, I don't even know what to add to what you just said. They're even if you don't trust their playoff stock, they are very much a team that should just steamroll opponents that are inferior last year. They had the highest winning percentage against sub 500 opponents last season. It wouldn't shock me if they did that again. And how do they get worse?
That's the question, right? Year? Like, how does this go 50 wins or lower? I mean, other than injury, like where is that argument coming from? It's a rhetorical question. I don't see it,
Yeah, it's just, I guess what could happen is just like, if Evan Mobley doesn't broaden his offensive horizons enough, then you run into still some issues with the dual big stuff. If they're not a better rebounding team in some of those moments, or when Mobley's playing by himself, maybe Niang, I don't think either of us expect him to have this huge postseason impact, but he should be someone who's able to eat minutes during the regular season. And then if you don't get a bounce back here from Dean Wade, if Isaac Okoro doesn't shoot 40% on negative 3-point attempts per game, or whatever his volume was last year, I could see areas where there's like either pullback or you don't even come close to answering these questions in the affirmative, the positive. I'm so high on this. Again, I have not made my East pick. I'm not afraid to pick the Cavs to come out of the East. I just don't know if I believe it technically just yet. And when we said this you brought it up, like, the Cavs could be the number 1 seed in the East. That is a thing that could actually happen for the regular season. You have the Celtics winning like 75 games, so it's not, according to you, but it could happen.
But I acknowledge the downside. I mean, might win 74. I don't know.
They're just they're a known commodity for us, and we talked about them at length on a previous pod. So we can move on here. The Detroit Pistons at 28.5. What do you have for them?
I think finally I have an under. I have them at 28 wins, and I'm looking for ways to knock that total down. But I'm also running up against the idea that they added more veterans. Joe Harris, Monte Morris, they should help. Cade Cunningham is supposed to play this year, which seems like that's worth some wins. So I'm tempted to want to knock this down, so it's pretty clearly the under. But I can't get down. And look, at 28, what do they win? 17 last year? That's like seems so low. It can't even be true. Yeah. So I'm giving them 11 more wins than last year, and I'm looking for ways to reduce that, but I can't really do it because every time I try to, I see there's veterans that should set the floor fairly high. And if all these young guys get a little better and Cade plays, it's not like 28 wins it's a low total. It's a really low total, but I think it's doable for just the talent's just so much better. And I don't know what Monty Williams is going to do either. Maybe you can.
And look, we know the Wizards will make sure they're the worst team in the conference. The second worst team in the conference last year, 127. So for you to say that they're going to win 28, you're not saying that they're going to be like flirting with the play-in. However, I went with 25 because I don't know. And it was because I needed to pull wins somewhere. And I think I get too scared when I'm doing exact win totals. Over-unders are a little bit easier. I went under as well, clearly. But like, I'm afraid to go too low or too high because like you don't, but I'm like at the end, this is a team where that's 8 more wins than last year. How many wins is Cade Cunningham healthy and year 2 Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey and a reliance on Asar Thompson and the additions of Joe Harris worth? Like, what does it come down to? And how many of these veterans, and just being honest, when you're as entrenched in the NBA discourse as we are, like, you're intrigued by even teams that aren't meant to be good because they have all these young players that could be X, or that have already, in the case of Jalen Duren, who's like organized chaos, is already X. What could he now morph into? That doesn't mean that they're going to be good. And they're still at a point where, yes, the talking points of get ready to fire up the trade machine for Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic, it's a cliche. It also might happen. And Monty Williams saying that or hinting that the dual non-shooting big lineups aka Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman, are dead, a thing of the past. That's great. But like, you're still reliant. Are we sure they're going to get to enough lineups where they're surrounding Cade, Jaden Ivey, and Arsar Thompson with requisite shooting? And the problem with doing that, by the way, is all three of those guys can't be on the floor at the same time then if you want enough shooting. So who are you pulling minutes away from? And there's also just the Pistons are very much still trying to figure out what they have, not just because Arsar Thompson is coming in, who you and I both love, but Cade Cunningham didn't really play with Jaden Ivey last year. And so there's that element. There's a lack of familiarity here. There's a lack of certainty among the players that are most important to your future. And I think when push comes to shove, even if they're on pace for like 31 wins or something, that they are still going to cater towards the future coming out of the All-Star break. And I'm not saying they will trade guys beforehand necessarily, even though they might. It might just be, hey, like, Bojan, you're not going to be playing as many minutes, or Burks, like, you're kind of out of the rotation now. Maybe you get bought out if you're not moved. And so I just went 25, and I don't think it's still 8 more wins than last year. Like, that's a big jump.
Yeah, I think I don't think we've talked about the length of Monty Williams' contract is another indicator that there is going to be some leeway given here. Like, the expectation clearly is not that you turn this thing around to like yesterday. I think the other thing that'll be really telling is, does like someone like Morris figure to be like high in the rotation early in the year? Because you touched on it. You have Cunningham, you have Ivy, you have Thompson, and I guess you still have Killian Hayes, although like I think we kind of get the idea at this point. All that's to say, though, you've got at least 3 and maybe 4 primary ball handler types. Thompson is different, but I mean, eventually you'd want him on the ball because he's a good passer and he can be a transition attack by himself. Like, those guys haven't really played together. In some cases at all, literally have not played together. And you could imagine this season being very much a feeling out process from the guys that have the basketball a lot, which is just a ticket to really terrible offense. So I guess if you could pull, I want to pull wins away from this team. And I just couldn't make myself do it. But if you had to, I think this is where you might take like 3 or 4 off, and just because there were 3 teams last year that won fewer than 25 games. So it would be easy to imagine this team, which won 17, getting significantly better and still winning 23. You know, like there's a lot of, if we needed to really balance things out or find some losses, this is probably where I'd start looking.
Yeah, and if I had, like, say for something, let's just use the Cavs as an example. Like, these are exact records, so I'm not as concerned with, I need to pull wins away from this. But if it was the difference between saying that the Cavs are going to hit the over or the under, like, I would have ripped wins from this team in a heartbeat. And so that's what makes it a little tough there. Do you have anything else on the Pistons? Are you ready? We're coming up on the hardest team for me. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So the Indiana Pacers have an over-under of 37.5. Did I get that right? 38.5. Excuse me. Where did you go with them, Grant?
I swear I'm not looking at these lines. I'm at 39. And this is, I don't know if it's the toughest one for me. But the questions that I have the worst feel for the answer for are the ones that I think they really matter. Like, is this team going to defend well enough to make this what should be an awesome transition offense again, and Tyrese Halliburton being a genius to make that stuff hold up? And I guess my answer is probably no, because I have them under 500, like marginally, but still winning 4 more games than last year. I think there's a way that they, get quite a bit further north of this over-under number. But I struggle. I've talked about this before. I struggle with finding lineups for this team that I believe in defensively and offensively. I think they're going to have to like pick and choose. And someone like Buddy Hield, who may just be traded now, but like he matters so much to their attack, whether it's spotting up in transition, whether it's just providing spacing, whether it's bailout, deep shots. And I don't think you can build like a great defense if he's, being asked to guard somebody that matters. So I guess I've probably just kind of bounced around here, but the defense is the big question for me. We love Halliburton. It's hard to, say anything bad about him. So I guess I am going over, but again, by the absolute slimmest margin possible.
Well, this is like a Houston Rockets situation, only it should be a good basketball team. I have them at 38. Yeah. And it's just, The thing I would add to what you said, which is just going to be my phrase for apparently every single team, the thing I would add to what Grant just pointed out is just they're not caps lock rebuilding, but they're starting. Bennedict Mathurin's going to start just like he did towards the end of the season. Caitlin Cooper wrote a fascinating piece actually today on how they might be relying on Ben Shepherd more than a lot of people thought because of what he can help do to open up the floor while you're also playing two bigs that don't necessarily space the floor, and Obi Toppin and Jarris Walker. And hey, that's the other element in all this. As my dogs go off in they're not happy. They want to go Pacers over. If anyone could hear Wade and Thor in the background, like Obi Toppin's still an unknown. Jarris Walker is still he's a rookie. And so how much of a defensive impact is he going to make? How long does it take him to figure it out on offense? What type of lineups you have to run to cater to the fact that, hey, he's probably not going to be the best floor space or even as a standstill option. This team is going to play fast, which I think could actually hurt its defense. Even if you're throwing some certain lineups out there that are all defense, they could make progress, but like they're still Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner are just these quantities. And even Bruce Brown is, but not at a fringe star level. And then after that, it's a chaos of questions. And a lot of them are pleasant. Like you just have them when you have, all right, well, what is Bennedict Mathurin? What is Jarris Walker? What is Ben Shepherd? What is Obi Toppin? They have still, I think, telegraphed more than people are crediting that, hey, this isn't about this year yet. Mm-hmm. And I guess their interest in Pascal Siakam could imply the otherwise. And if they get off to a good start, do they explore the trade market? They did sign Bruce Brown. He's also a human trade exception. So don't rule out the fact that he gets dealt to a contender so that Indy could recoup assets and then gets worse in the process. I wouldn't predict that per se. They may want him there if they plan to be a lot better next season. This just isn't the year yet for them.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything to add to that. I think they'll be one of the most entertaining, kind of 500-ish teams in the league. I think that's fair to say, but that's not really relevant to guessing how often they're going to win.
The Miami Heat, Grant, they have an over-under of 44.5. What do you got for them?
I'm going under here. I have them for 43 wins. Obviously, that would have been different had the Dame stuff worked out. I just think it's not really that complicated. They lost two key guys in Strus and Vincent. I think they mattered a lot. And then you're losing those guys from a team that they won 44, I think, last year. Yeah, 44 games in the regular season, but they had a negative point differential. Let me triple check that before I throw that out there. I'm fairly sure that's right. Yeah, they had a negative point differential. So I'm basically saying they're going to be about as good as they were last year when they should have won like 41 games, maybe a little better. And that's actually, as I phrase it that way, it's kind of hard to defend that. Because why? Like, why are the Heat going to win, should they win more games than they should have won last year, right? If we assume they're actually a 40 or 41 win team, why are they better? That's a hard case to make. And I'm just saying Heat culture, Jimmy and Bam, and that's pretty much it.
Hey, I mean, look, at this point, that's probably fair.
Yeah, that's all I got. I mean, I just think they're going to be a little worse, than they were record-wise last year. And that almost feels kind of generous because the playoffs are just different. And we're talking about the regular season for them.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they very much acted like a team that was going to get Damian Lillard. And guess what? They didn't get Damian Lillard. And now, as you alluded to or mentioned, two of their top six used rotation players for the playoffs are just gone. Yeah. And yes, I do think Josh Richardson was a great pickup for them. Duncan Robinson showed all sorts of signs that he's about to engage in a renaissance while dribbling during the postseason. It's just this team doesn't historically care about the postseason. So I went 43. We're in the same neighborhood. I will say it was a little bit harder because I was digging in. They had like a lot of people were criticizing their offense all year, and it was probably us. They had a nice little offensive turnaround kind of at the start of February, but then it came at the expense of their defense. And so they have not necessarily coalesced into this strong offensive and defensive force at the same time. And I think you can now assume or argue that they have, I know Tyler Hero will be healthier, but like, well, he was absent for the playoffs, but like he was there for you for a good chunk of the regular season. Like, are they do they have less like half court optionality? Because what's the pathway to getting more? Is it Kyle Lowry's just better, even though he's another year older? I don't see the theory of this team improving at either end of the floor. And with that, barring, of course, a trade. That's their caveat isn't injuries. It's the superstar trade. Pat Riley has by the way, Pat Riley post Jimmy Butler has just gone on, and Andy Ellisberg, the front office in general, has just gone on these tours of almost acquiring superstars,
Right.
but not quite. Like they're pulling the Danny Ainge
Yeah.
circa towards the tail end of his Celtics tenure.
I would add the last thing is I do think I can see a way that the offense is better if
Okay.
Tyler Hero seems very motivated, at least as far as Portland goes. Doesn't like Portland because they don't like him. He says, which I get it. But
By the way, that's
definitely
fine. That's not. I saw some people were like, "Oh,
yeah, no, that's totally fine." But he could be better, and I think if Duncan Robinson really is back, like he's just probably a better offensive piece than either Strus or Vincent. But you're giving back a lot defensively. So this team was 25th on offense and 7th on defense last year. You wouldn't stun me if we basically just had a reversal, and that's how their record ends up roughly the same. But I think the offense will be better. The defense will not be number 7. I think I feel pretty comfortable saying,
and
with
also
the personnel they're going to have to play.
Neither of us mentioned like Bam Adebayo improved a lot offensively last year, just like from a self-scoring perspective. And then, so you had them at 43 or 44? I have you down for 43. Okay, I had you down for 2 different numbers. I got it wrong. So 43 wins. We're in. That's the first team I think we're just in lockstep with.
Yeah. I think that's.
Are we going to be in lockstep with this next team, which is the Milwaukee Bucks? They have an over/under of 53.5. Grant, take it away.
Over 56, which is 2 fewer games than they won last year. So that's kind of if you're anchoring to that, this team is, I think, better. We may need to get into the playoff versus regular season discussion given the Lillard trade, but it's just really hard for me to see this offense not being so much better and just like consistently better than last year. So if whatever you give back on defense, if Lopez continues to age, or maybe if Middleton's not all there, 56 just feels like a totally achievable goal for this. I mean, they still have Giannis, and maybe Giannis showed some signs last season that, the jump shooting got worse and he just had one of his poor playoff performances, but maybe that was just, he was hurt, which he was. I just don't know how much that contributes to it. So 56 feels like, I feel very comfortable at that win total, even though it's the second highest one I have in this conference.
I went 56 as well, and that was actually a last-minute swap. I pulled some wins away from a team or two to come because I wanted to make sure that I was high enough on this team. I understand the depth questions, and we got into that with Boston. How many teams in any given game can potentially have the 4 best players on the floor? Phoenix can't even do that. And yes, I'm including Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez in this. You can get into Lopez's age. You could get into Chris Middleton's knees. But because of what Lopez does defensively, because of the value Chris Middleton is a phenomenal offensive player. And I don't think that people, not people in general, and Bucks fans, of course, understand this. It's a phenomenal, he's a great offensive player. They can, in any given game, have four of the 4 best players on the court. Boston is definitely in that conversation now. As I mentioned, Phoenix can't do that. Who else? Is there another team that can? Am I missing one?
No, I mean, you got to think about like
Cleveland?
Denver, maybe.
Denver, Cleveland.
Yeah, no, Cleveland's a good one. But yeah, you're totally right. Like the top end talent on this team, Chris Middleton was the lead ball handler and pick and roll operator on a team that won the title. Like maybe he's not that anymore, but he was that not that long ago. So if he can and he doesn't have to do that anymore because you have the best pick and roll operator, like maybe ever, you could throw a couple other names in there, but Dame is that guy on offense. So everybody kind of, and Giannis too, Dame being there slots Giannis into what I think is a much more fitting offensive role where you're not asking him to do more than he's great. Obviously, like big revelation, a guy that's won a couple MVPs is great. But Dame being there just kind of lets everybody else on this team be what they ought to be on offense. And then we can worry about the defense when the playoffs roll around. I just think they're going to crush teams during the regular season.
And are you worried at all? Because I think with Giannis, it's natural. We've already kind of seen him play the role that he'll probably play beside Dame when you go back to that championship run. Do you worry at all, though, about what sort of being nudged down a peg does to Chris Middleton?
I think certainly no, I'm not. I think it's better for him. I think because I think even while acknowledging that Middleton has been underrated and is at his peak was probably just full stop one of the best wings in the league. I think at his age and with his injury history, kind of becoming a clear third guy. Giannis is tricky, but Dame is your biggest offensive piece. Giannis is there, and then Middleton can handle like third banana duties. I'm pretty confident. And if you're trying to preserve him, we're getting a little bit far afield from talking about win totals, but Dame sort of organizes this team in a way that really feels right to me, at least on offense. So yeah, and also Giannis has got this whole organization thinking, and rightfully so, like, we're a championship team. We're trying to win all the time. There's no excuse for, mailing shit in, and we got bounced in the first round last year. We're entitled to nothing. All this is like, we're not talking, X's and O's or anything, but I think sometimes if you're talking about regular season win totals, a team's like mental approach to the year and game to game really matters. And as old as some of Milwaukee's key guys are, I think they're kind of like the Warriors in this sense. I really think they're going to give a shit about the regular season, and that can be worth a couple wins, over the course of so many games.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. I don't have anything to add on them though. Did you want to move on to the New York Knicks?
Yep. Let's get
They are at 45.5, which is actually, from when we did our look ahead, their win total got bumped up a full victory. I'm assuming just because the Heat didn't get Dame probably factored into that equation. But where are you at with them?
It's a narrow under for me. It's 45. So I have them losing 2 games off of last year's 47 wins. I just don't think they're that different. I think DiVincenzo kind of weirdly is going to help them in ways that Obi Toppin didn't. Like, I think DiVincenzo is just a better rebounder, but I don't know how much his actual like offensive value matters on a team that has a bunch of guys at the positions he'll theoretically play. But so I guess I just view them. Maybe the way to look at this is Randall is due for a down year since he alternates. And so that's where the 2 wins I'm taking away come from. But I didn't see a big reason to bump this team way up. And you could talk yourself into bumping them down if you decided maybe like all these second chance points and offensive rebounds will dry up and their offense will be a lot worse. I don't know how years from now we'll look back on this team as having the number 2 offense and like how it will make sense. But
offensive rebounding into threes is how they
apparently that's the recipe. But I just view them as fairly similar with some offensive downside, I guess is the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I just feel like there's more stability in the goodness of their team because of Jalen Brunson, that if Julius Randle does have a down year, there are things they can do to offset it. Josh Hart is there now. So like, if you need to, Julius Randle's having like bad games or a terrible year, like Josh Hart can eat into the power forward rotation minutes. So can RJ Barrett at the 4 as well. I am curious to see, they did probably take enough threes last year, but they could stand to make more of them. And you need like one of your, like an RJ Barrett to hit threes, or you need Dante DiVincenzo to replicate what he did in Golden State, because I think that was a career year for him from downtown. Yeah. I worry about more so than the offense, just because Jalen Brunson's like, even if you don't give him optimal spacing, the dude I'm just over the moon about Jalen Brunson.
Matter.
Yeah. What do they look like defensively? Like, there's not a properly sized wing defender on this team. RJ Barrett's the closest they get to a true wing. Josh Hart is like idiosyncratic, and so like maybe you want to call him a wing, but he's also a forward or a guard. Quentin Grimes will defend wings, but he's 6'4", I believe. And so it's like, it's not all about size, but like size on the wings can be important, which is also, I think, why they're so hot for OG Anunoby of Toronto. And maybe they go out and get him this year. I have them at over. I have them at 46, which is 1 fewer than last year. This is to people who got mad because I said that they could be a little bit worse this year when I wrote something earlier in the summer. Like, growth isn't linear, and your win totals are not necessarily reflective of where you're at. My biggest question, aside from the defense, is, are they built to facilitate the growth of the players who can still improve? And that is RJ Barrett. That is Emmanuel Quickly. That is Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes in his role also is just like, well, what does improvement look like? Shooting 40% from 3 and maybe a little bit more consistent on defense and maybe more frequency attacking closeouts, but he's not going to have the ball in his hands a ton. And also, I recognize, and RJ Barrett just proved this, he's better off, more comfortable on ball, but like, you're not going to build even your bench units around him at this point to give him the ball, because he has not shown that he's going to be good enough for long enough. And then this is Emmanuel Quickly, deserved 6th man of the year candidate. Fantastic season. Great defensively. I think it's fair to look at the playoffs and question was the shot making that he progressed into during the regular season, because he didn't start out on fire, by the way, either. Was that hot stretch or sign of a new normal? It's just, you're right. They're the same, and there's enough things that could go wrong for them to be worse. I just think Jalen Brunson ties it all together in a way. And even just having a Josh Hart, you mentioned DiVincenzo. I don't know if he'll be used to his full utility on offense, because that's not the way this team offense plays when you look at what some of the things that DiVincenzo does best. But maybe they get him moving a little bit more. Or if he's going to be part of those shot of adrenaline lineups where they're getting out in transition anyway, done. Now you have a guy who he'll go spray out and hit some transition threes. So I think they are largely the same team, which is still and I don't see the upside that's exponentially or measurably or visibly better than last year, but that's still a pretty damn good team if they are the same team.
Yeah, I think Brunson, to your point, is the reason that like there's not a scenario that's even remotely realistic that doesn't involve huge injury where this team wins, 38 games or something. Like that's not there. They're deep enough. They have enough vets. There's enough continuity. And Brunson is just like, if you have Jalen Brunson and he's healthy, your team is gonna compete that night. Like pretty much, like that's the given understanding of how this works. So yeah, want to go to the Magic?
The Orlando Magic, their over under is set at 37.5, I believe. Yeah, 37.5. Yes. Where are you at with them?
So I went over here. I have them at 38, 4 more wins than they had last year. Which I think if you
look at these over unders, this is incredible.
No, I swear I didn't. I mean, and this was actually a hard one for me. I think I had this as low as like 33 at one point, and then I had 39 feels right, and I just settled on the higher end of that at 38. You start with the big issues, like I think Wendell Carter and Paolo and Franz are just. I love that front line. I think they all could be better. I think Carter continues to be one of the more underrated bigs in the league. And Paolo and Franz are like, I don't know, there's not a lot of forward combos you take over those two if you just, you're talking about the next like 5 years of development. I still hate their guards, so I'm not going much higher. But 38, like I do. So I would say this. I think people that view Orlando as like the OKC of the East, where it's like there's 50 win upside here if you squint hard enough, I don't see that. I think it's more likely that they finish in the low to mid 30s than they get up over 40 or even, win more than they lose. But it's just like a pretty easy to anticipate uptick, right? I think assuming all their key young guys are healthy, that they should just be a little better than they were last year. And that's kind of diminishing their closing stretch, which was actually, pretty darn good.
So we are in the same neighborhood, but I'm going under at 37, which is still, I think, 2 more games than they won. 3 more games than they won last year. You're welcome, Orlando. I'm clearly very high. I love the front line, as you mentioned. Here's where I think we need to pump the brakes on them showing immediate growth. I think they deserve the same patience that OKC gets in market, where I don't think OKC's fans are, well, this team needs to make the playoffs after last year. They might be super high and think, as you said, they have the 50 win upside. It does feel like there's more of an urgency or pressure from the fan base, or like for the Magic to do more, or even just, I would say this rather, even if there's an expectation for them to have this mega jump, I feel like it's somewhat unfounded, which sounds so cruel because you found 2 guys to build around. That is so hard to do at the same time, and you have them. But here's where I'm at. They were faced entering this offseason with a shortage of players who can pass, dribble, and dribble from a standstill, let's say, and shoot. Like the player who can do all 3. They then proceeded to turn upper percentile cap space and 2 lottery picks into Anthony Black, who can't shoot, Jet Howard, who's not going to create, and Joe Ingles, who will get you discounted movie tickets. Paolo Banchero might still be that guy. And Paolo Banchero will be that guy. Let me be more definitive on that. And then you have Franz Wagner. That is it. It is not, please do not tell me Markelle Fultz mid-range jumpers count as floor spacing, because they do not. Maybe Jalen Suggs develops into that player. I have questions about the dribbling aspect of that more than anything else. But like that's there. And this is all, by the way, in the backdrop of, hey, their offense in the half court was better than 3 bad on purpose teams and the Toronto Raptors. Like, that's not, you're working from a pretty low baseline, and you did, I would argue, very little to absolutely nothing to ensure that you can improve upon that. This team is, the future is still bright. I think they should still win more games because the defense for most of last year, there was that pocket. It was like 50 games or something. They were 6th in points allowed per possession. That's a huge sample.
Finished 11th, which is, I think, totally repeatable. Like that should be the expectation, where they are in the neighborhood of a top 10 defense. But I think you hit, this is the key issue. They overall were 26th on offense. And if the fix for that is we got 2 rookie guards that probably make us worse on offense to add to a backcourt that already is a weakness, like and now I'm questioning how I added wins to their total from last year, because I guess I think Banchero should probably get better. But he's better from being an inefficient high volume scorer. Like, he was not an efficient scorer last year. So if he gets to like league average efficiency for his volume and position, maybe that's where these wins come from. But I don't really, I put it this way. I would be really surprised if this was not a bottom 10 offense again. And like bottom 5 is in play. So that's why I guess maybe what I'm doing is making the case for why we got to chill out on, here comes Orlando. They're going to make the playoffs this year. Like that's not there until the offense gets sorted out. They just need better offensive players. It's not like you can make stylistic tweaks and fix this.
And the only thing I would honestly push back against is I think Jet Howard, assuming he plays, would help them. He's huge. He's 6'8". He's pretty long, I believe. And just the fact that he can shoot will open up space for Paolo and Franz and Markelle Fultz and Jalen Suggs. That goes a long way unto itself. But it's a little bit troubling that if you're giving them the same playing time, which I know they won't, I would probably bet way more money on Jet Howard having the better rookie or more impactful rookie campaign than Anthony Black at this point. And that's not, I don't think that's a harbinger of how their careers will turn out, but it is sort of telltale of, hey, this team's future is bright, but they're still a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair.
We are on to the Philadelphia 76ers. Good luck with this one. Take us away, Grant.
I mean, I got him. I had him much lower than this. And then after we talked to Brian Saporek, I think he just made the simple point of like, they've got Joel Embiid and they've been really good without James Harden when Joel Embiid was there. So I got him at 48, which is, I guess, an under, because their over-under is 48.5, right? Am I seeing that right?
Correct. They're over-under 48.5.
Narrowly under. I had them at like 44 before Brian kind of, I think, corrected my thinking. I guess I get, and that's 6 fewer wins than last year. So if you want to just say, well, they lost, Milton and Niang, and Harden probably will, I don't know what to do with the Harden stuff. Either he won't be there or they'll get an underwhelming package for him.
He did, if I could interject, this is the most positive development. I think this whole thing is James Harden is happy to play. I think it was from Woj, will be happy to play at full bore so long as the Sixers are still trying to trade him, which, hey, that's called, from the James Harden like trade demand playbook, that's a pretty big development.
That counts as full buy-in, I guess.
Honestly, I have them at 55 wins just because I'm just
you know what, you had me. If you could have kept that bit going, because I couldn't. I don't know if you saw my face. It's like my eyes got heat. What? Do you have? So I got them at 48. Where are you?
So I actually, and this is keeping in theme with how I'm afraid to take away wins from people. I'm going 49 here just so I could say that I hit the over on them, which was 48.5. We were both at 48, and I had them. So I bounced around too. I had them at 44 at one point. I had them at 47. I had them at 49 this morning before we recorded this, dropped them down to 48, and now I have them back at 49. I think, honestly, that doesn't say much about my decisiveness, but I think it's fair to be that ambiguous about this team right now.
Yeah.
You should listen to the Sixers look ahead with Toporek, because he talked about the play without Embiid. We got into some of the numbers. There's also just like good talent on this roster, even if you're factoring in that, okay, let's say James Harden is still here, but not James Harden. Maybe you get the leap from Tyrese Maxey. Tobias Harris is still, stop looking at his salary. Tobias Harris is still a good player. You have DeAnthony Melton. You could run some really interesting lineups there. I mean, PJ Tucker will probably pass more out of more threes than he will ever take, but that's fine. And then also, just what if they do trade James Harden? And I asked this question to Brian where it was in my mind, and I still kind of can't see this. It feels like this is going to be a gap year no matter what. But for the regular season specifically, if you wind up trading James Harden for expiring contracts who will play and picks you're planning on using later next summer in trades when you have more cap flexibility to also spend in free agency, those are still players who are occupying space in a rotation that could need it. And you're going to win games because of Joel Embiid. Just looking at the numbers is I can't even remember what it was exactly, but they had like a plus 15 net rating when Tobias, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey played without James Harden last year. Now, I think it's definitely different when those minutes become the standard rather than just like we're trying to navigate these pockets of time or some of these games. But they're going to be fine. You could get it. Well, what if Joel Embiid gets hurt? That is the caveat for every single team here. I will say this though, just based off all the drama, if they somehow spit out 50 plus victories through all this, it wouldn't be the most surprising 50 plus victory season I've seen, but I would still be just fairly surprised. And by the way, also in the backdrop of all this, is there any adjustment period of trying to adapt to how Nick Nurse wants you to play at both ends of the floor, but specifically on offense? We have all these players coming out and throwing shade at Doc Rivers and his offense. There's going to be a material change, it seems like. And could that take some time for everyone to, and how invested will James Harden be in making those adaptations when he has his eye on joining the Clippers?
I'm going to move up to 49 because I want to join you in over territory. That feels
we
like
need to go through and see how many Eastern Conference overs you have it.
Too many, way too many. There's no question there's too many, but I don't care. I'm just trying to
honestly, I'm not insulting you, but if you're a fan of a team in the East that Grant has not hit the over for, you should be irate.
You should be really mad. I have so many overs. But like as you were talking, I just had I'm cutting a lot of analytical corners for some of these because we are just kind of trying to be odds makers, which is impossible. If you have an in prime MVP, you should be a threat to win 50 games. Like that's just as you should. And the Sixers do. And I almost like, who cares about the rest of this stuff? Joel Embiid was the MVP last year. He earned it. It's not like we're 5 years down the road from that. It's 1 year later. I assume he's going to be really close to that. And maybe Nick Nurse finds ways to utilize him that are just better than Doc Rivers. Like now suddenly just catching strays all over the place for his coaching. So I'm gonna get to 49 with you, and that way we can both be over on the Sixers.
Speaking of future MVP candidate, we have Chris Boucher's Toronto Raptors, and they are at. I was actually surprised at how low this one was.
That's
even
so low.
36.5. So where are you at with them?
Guess what, Dan? I have an over. Sorry to shock you with that one. So this one also moved around a ton because I think I had them at like 38 and then 39. And then I was just looking at some of the numbers. They played like a 45 win team last year, and they did that based on their point differential. And they did that with, I think now was pretty clearly, now we're going to shit on Nick Nurse after we just said he's an upgrade for the Sixers, but was pretty clearly like, the voice was not penetrating anymore. It doesn't seem like. So I don't know how much weight you give that, but I think there's still so much talent here. And I think maybe everybody was disappointed Scotty Barnes didn't get better last year. Well, now maybe this is the year he takes what should have been the second year jump. Pascal Siakam is an all NBA player. OG Anunoby can guard the shit out of everything. Gary Trent Jr. is really underrated. He's a good off guard. Jakob Poeltl, I think, gives them some options offensively they didn't have before. They have a real center to anchor a defense that, was quirky and weird and gave, so 43 wins. That feels high. It's way over their over under. But it's also 2 fewer wins than, their point differential suggested they should have had last year. So I don't feel like I'm way out on a limb giving them 43.
Well, they did lose their most dangerous shooter and the pick and roll partner who drove so many of.
You notice how I neglected to mention that, making my over case.
Yeah, so it's fascinating that you have them there because I have them over 2. I have them. What did I put for them? 38 wins. And so here's where I actually think your biggest assumption is flawed. You've now just assumed that they're going to stand pat for the season. Yep. No, and actually that might not be flawed because you have that top 6 protected pick to San Antonio, so you're not going to tank. Are they more likely to double down? There's too much combustibility. I was even kind of factoring in like there's no way they exit this season with Pascal, Gary Trent Jr., and OG all still on the roster, right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from. But the other thing for me is, even if they do, the offense, Scotty Barnes could get better. Pascal Siakam's already good. The offense should still be just as bad overall, because you've now, and I know this is just, I don't want to paint the fan base with a broad brush. There's a very large subset of Raptors fans, mostly on YouTube, that hate us at this point. They think Fred VanVleet is addition by subtraction. I do not see that at all. How does that? I can't even make a case for it. He was your most dangerous shooter. I don't care about the percentages. He was your most dangerous shooter. He was also your best pick and roll initiator when looking at how you're going to connect with Jakob Poeltl, because in theory, defenses are going to respect his off the dribble jumper more than they will a Pascal Siakam at this point, or Scotty Barnes, who it can look like buffering internet whenever he even tries to take one of those. I don't understand how we could expect them to get better based off the personnel that they have right now. Is it Grady Dick and Gary Trent Jr. and Dennis Schroeder all have these monster shooting seasons and the floor is opened up? Or is Darko Rajakovic just some offensive genius that's going to be able to, cut through these corners in the half court despite not having any spacing? And that says nothing of just like, there's an organizational disconnect here, right? Where it's Ujiri's talking about the selfish play when asked about Pascal Siakam's extension. You have Siakam pushing back against that, but you then have Scotty Barnes saying, yeah, it kind of felt like every man for himself here last year. Hey, a lot of those players are still on the roster. I know Fred VanVleet is gone, but how do they feel about him saying that? Then I also found it funny. I don't know how related to this is to a disconnect, but you had Ujiri saying, oh, our interest in Dame was overstated. And then you had Bobby Webster saying, yeah, that was like our most aggressive offer for a star ever. It's just like,
which you guys
work directly with.
They can't pick a direction in ways big and small. Nobody knows.
I can't get to over 500 for a team, and to borrow your phrasing, that won't pick a direction. This is now, look, coming off the title campaign, a lot of the stuff they did made sense. You had the Tampa tank. That made sense too. They've been working from disadvantages. They've had more than enough time to choose a discernible course. They have not done that.
How do we talk you into the under? Because I think one of the most salient points is if you're just looking in this conference for where's the teardown team, it's hard you don't get very far before Toronto comes up, right?
I'm still high on a lot of their individual players. And I also think, I'm going to pose this to you. What's more likely, based off how Toronto has handled business, that they trade two of Siakam, OG, or Gary Trent Jr., or that two of those guys leave for absolutely nothing in free agency?
That they leave for nothing in free agency. So then that's an argument for
the over, by the way.
Yeah, that's an argument for the over. Even though, like, in a weird way, well, it's hard to say this now because if they win 47 games or whatever, it'll be stupid to say, oh, you did something wrong. But it's possible that they could win 47 games and still have done something wrong because of the scenario you just laid out, where the way that you did that was by keeping your guys that now you're probably just going to lose, or certainly will get less value for than if you traded them. And then where are you, right? This time next year. So they will confound us forever, I'm pretty sure. But this will be interesting because we're pretty far apart on them.
The Washington Wizards, they haven't, I was actually surprised that their over under was this high. 23 and a half. Okay, they get bumped down. It was at 24 and a half. Where do you have them?
Under. I have 22 and 60. 20 and 62 would be fine. I think I may have had that for a while. They're just the only clear tanker. They're a pretty good sized notch below the Pistons, who I think are second in that unenviable race to the bottom. This is a team designed to lose, basically. That's clearly the plan. That's the right plan. We love it. We think they did all the correct things. But this season will just be a ton of losses. Like that is the goal. That will be what they try to do with the guys that they play, with the style. I mean, it's just, how does this team win 25 games? Like, what is the case for that? I don't see it.
So what did you have them at?
22.
Wow. I have them at 18. And I wondered if there's a bit of like the Utah jazzification of them from last offseason, where they have NBA talent and we just assume they're going to get rid of all of it, but it doesn't happen early enough for them not to hit their over. But like, even like this, if you're going to hit the over or think that they're not, like, you're just resting on this, oh, Jordan Poole is going to be ridiculous and Kyle Kuzma is going to be ridiculous. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen just based off what the Wizards new front office just did. They are not going to let that happen. That's what's going to happen, is you will start seeing guys get shut down or they will be moved. I will quite frankly be, if more than one of DeLon Wright, Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones finish the season on this roster, I would quite frankly be shocked. And it wouldn't surprise me, because we're talking about, like, not that, I guess Tyus Jones might be on the same level as a Mike Conley and so is a Kyle Kuzma. It just wouldn't shock me if this team made the decisions that Utah eventually made earlier, because there's just no way. Even, like, what is the theory of this team on defense right now?
Oh,
I do not know.
Not one.
Right. And so there's just no scenario in my head where, even if, okay, you keep these guys, that they're going to get, like, the Jazz were one game above 500, I think, on February 1st. That is not in the cards for the Wizards. And so they will trade their way out of even sniffing 25 games.
I think too,
25 wins.
And this is just another way of saying, the goal is to lose here. Guys that like Johnny Davis was a lottery pick last year and was really bad. Like, I think he's going to play. Same with, Bilal Coulibaly, like, cannot possibly be ready. All the defensive upside he has, he's going to play. He's going to play a ton, right? And, like, you could, Patrick Baldwin Jr., who came over in the Poole trade, is someone that's probably going to play. And they'll play them more than they should, because, one, like, you probably should try to figure out what you got in some of these guys, see who maybe is someone that should be a fixture, for whatever your 3, 5, 7-year plan is. But also because they're going to put a ceiling on your team's performance that is really low if you're playing all these guys that are so inexperienced. So, I struggled predicting, whenever we do these, any team to win, like, to have a win total in the teens, because that's just, everything's got to be wrong for you to be down in the teens. But I don't think you're off base for thinking that might be the case for this team.
Yeah, and could they also be, like, kind of vintage OKC or even close to process type Sixers, where there's going to be, or like kind of the Blazers, like every latter half of the season, where there's like a churn of, oh, they're adding these guys or they're playing guys that they weren't playing before. Like, it feels like they could do something like that, where the rotation for a lot of these other rebuilding teams might just be consistent. Like, they're just going to add guys on the fly. And then, like, someone who wasn't on this team at the start of the season is going to be on this team in December playing real minutes.
Yeah, I think that's right. The only guys who are going to play a lot for sure are, like, Kuzma and Poole, and I don't know, like, that might kind of be it. Tyus Jones, I guess. But then who knows which of those guys will be around? Poole, I guess, because, you just invested in him. But yeah, this team's going to be terrible.
You guys know what time it is? It is, and shout out to, let me get this name, the Discord name correctly, Killhoss, for renaming. You've officially rebranded it. Grant loved it. I loved it as soon as you said it. Stat padding. It is no longer garbage time. And I think that even probably, it says just as much what we're doing here, but stat padding. Also, if anyone knows or has a connect with Johnny Pemberton, Bo from Superstore, which is where that sound effect is from, can we somehow, connect us with them? I would love for him to record that. I went on to his Cameo, which is deactivated. I wanted him to record the Hardwood Knocks stat padding introduction. So if anyone just happens to know Johnny Pemberton, let me know, or please connect us. Grant, I think we should probably begin with, do we want to go through our final record projections very quickly?
Let's do it.
So to that, you've been introducing them. Go ahead.
All right, so here we go. Dan, we are going to do Eastern Conference record projections, and we will go alphabetically because we're great at it. We start with the Atlanta Hawks. How many wins? I got them for 44.
I got them for 43.
All right. Give me your Boston Celtics win total.
52 wins.
I'm going 58. Big difference for us. Brooklyn Nets.
37 wins.
41 for me. Again, I'm more optimistic than you are. Charlotte Hornets.
31 wins. I think they probably make some moves.
I'm going 40, and I feel real bad about it, but they won 39 2 years ago. Chicago Bulls.
They're largely the same team. Give me 40 wins.
Give me 42. Agree. Cleveland Cavaliers.
Regular season beast, 53 wins.
I got them at 55, even bigger beasts. Detroit Pistons.
They're going to get 25 wins. Let's pump the brakes on how much better they'll be.
I'm going 28. Similar thinking. Indiana Pacers.
This team is tough. I'm going 38 wins. They're still kind of rebuilding.
Yeah, 39. They're kind of in that middle. Miami Heat.
I have 43 wins. This team had such a disastrous offseason.
Same. So, but it's still only one fewer win than last year. So that's what we say about Heat culture, I guess. Milwaukee Bucks.
56 wins. This team is going to be great and kill people during the regular season.
Same for me. 56 for the Bucks. New York Knicks.
I'm going to go 46 wins here. One fewer than last year, but still over their projected total.
I'm going 45. I don't see a reason to move this, too high or too low based on last year. Orlando Magic.
In the words of you, get some players who can pass, dribble, and shoot at the same time. They'll get 37 wins.
I got them for 38. We agree there. Philadelphia 76ers.
Joel Embiid is really good, so they're going to get 49 wins.
I got 49 as well. You talked me up from 48. Toronto Raptors.
They'll get 38 wins. I don't know what to do with them.
I'm going 43 because I'm nuts. I don't know why. Washington Wizards.
They are the most egregious tanker in the league. 19 wins.
22 for me.
Do we have, so we also have, let's start with this. We have to thank, let me get this Discord name right as well. Rubik's, why am I missing this? I'll get to the credit. Grant, can you take us through one of your garbage times?
Sure. I have some real simple quizzes for you, and I'm even going to give you options for your answers. So one of these three will be the correct answer, and we're going real basic to start with. We'll get stranger as we proceed. Dan, who led the league in total points last year? Jason Tatum, Joel Embiid, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
Oh, Joel Embiid.
Jason Tatum. Who led in total rebounds? Jokic, Vucevic, or Sabonis?
Sabonis.
That is correct. Who led in total assists? Jokic, Trae, or Harden? By the way, awesome that Jokic shows up on both of these leaderboards for rebounds and assists.
I'm going to go with Harden.
It is Trae. Turnovers. Who had the most total turnovers last year? Anthony Edwards, Jordan Poole, or Trae Young?
Trae Young.
Also Trae, you got it. Led in assists and turnovers. Maybe get off the ball a little bit. Who had the most technical fouls last year? Luka, Draymond, or Dylan Brooks?
Draymond.
That is correct. I think he had 21 and nobody else had more than 20. So he handily took care of that one. You got one for me or you want another one?
Let's go to, so this is submitted from Rubik's Gal on the Discord/YouTube. Came up with guess this players. So I'm going to give you the clues. I know who the player is, and you're going to have to guess there's no options on this one.
Oh, so I just have to know this is kind of, okay. All right. I'm ready.
It's exactly what you did to me. We asked for submissions and Rubik's Gal gave us a ton. We'll do a few here and we'll save some, obviously. Are you ready, Grant?
Nope. Let's go do it anyway.
Okay. Clue number 1. Selected second overall by the Grizzlies, but refused to play for them because
Steve
it wasn't.
Francis.
Damn. Very good. That was on the level of easy. So nice job. Are you? Wow. I'm impressed. I don't know. You didn't even let me get to God's will.
I'm older than you. I remember the early 2000s very well.
Okay. Guess this player, or you'll never guess this player. Level 2. First clue. First player from his country to be selected in the first round of the draft. Anybody? No. He played for the Kings, the Cavs, the Rockets, went back to the Kings before venturing to New Orleans and Minnesota in the same season. He then played for Team X for part of one season. He was picked up by the Grizzlies for one last NBA season before a surgery for a meniscus tear ended his NBA career.
Give me the teams again. Kings and then what?
Kings, Cavs, Rockets, back to the Kings, over to New Orleans and Minnesota. And then he was picked up by the Grizzlies for one last NBA season before surgery on his meniscus ended his NBA career.
God, I wish I knew.
Next clue.
Keep going.
Shot 36% from three-point range for his career, but never averaged more than 12 points per game. His career high of 36 points was scored against Team X. And you'll know why this is being called Team X eventually.
I'm so I feel like I should know this. I have no idea right now.
He holds the record for the most NBA regular seasons games played in the three-point line era without ever playing in a playoff game. The only team he played for that got to the playoffs was Team X, but he was waived by them in April. Team X went on to win the NBA Finals, making his waiver the cruelest act in the history of the NBA.
I'm so stumped. What is happening right now? I should get him. Go ahead.
We're out of clues. You should have known this. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm just totally blank. Is it?
Well, can I tell you who Team X is?
Sure.
The Warriors.
So he was on the Warriors and they won the title, but they cut him loose before it happened.
Yes.
Started with the Kings. Is this Omri Caspi?
Yes, it is.
Woo. Oh man.
I'm no round of applause for you there. Team X should have been the dead giveaway.
What should have?
Team X. People who listen know that you're the Warriors guy.
Yeah, got there eventually. Jeez, that was tough.
Okay, this one was 2 players. And so for the longer segment, I think I won't be able to chop this up. This is just incredible. But this actually might be easier than the last one. But are you ready?
I'm sure.
Okay. The Defensive Player of the Year award was introduced in 82, 83, and was selected by members of the media, where the all-defense teams were selected by the coaches until a few years ago. On 4 occasions, the DPOY didn't even make it to first-team all-defense. Alvin Robertson and Dikembe Mutombo are 2 of these guys in successive years, made all-NBA, second-team, all-defense in their Defensive Player of the Year years. So basically the clue is, there are 4 players, 2 of which are Alvin Robinson and Dikembe Mutombo, who won Defensive Player of the Year without making first team all defense. So 2 of those guys are Alvin Robertson, Dikembe Mutombo. Do you happen to know the other 2 before we move on?
So Defensive Player of the Year that did not make first team all defense.
Correct.
I mean, that's got to. Oh boy, this has. So
what? Oh, I can keep going. We have more clues.
Oh, please, yeah.
So 2 of these players, we'll call them Player X and Player Y. Player Y never made an all-defense first team for his career. Player X has made exactly 1 all-defensive first team.
That's not helping me, but they've won DPOI. Okay.
Next clue, neither of them won another Defensive Player of the Year. Player X has 1 NBA championship ring. Player Y also has a championship ring. It came after his Defensive Player of the Year season, though.
I just can't get my head around winning Defensive Player of the Year and not making an all-defensive team. What the hell is going on? Do you have more clues? I'm going to need them.
Yeah, they faced off in an Olympics finals. Player X won gold and Player Y settled for the silver.
Oh, let's see. I'll just say, I'm trying to think of Defensive Players of the Year. Can I just say Marc Gasol?
He is one of them.
Yes. Okay. And who the hell else won DPOY but did not make first team?
I'm surprised you didn't just yell out Marc Gasol at first.
I would have thought that was recent enough to where he definitely was just on the all defensive team as well. Who got any more, or am I just gonna have to guess now?
I don't think the last clue I actually think pertains to Marc Gasol. So
okay. What was the last clue? Just out of curiosity.
It was in player-wise Defensive Player of the Year season. His team kept their opponents to 89.3 points per game. That is the last time that any NBA team has allowed fewer than 90 points per game over a season. That's
impressive. I don't know if that would have gotten me to Marc Gasol.
Oh, actually, I think that might be. Let me double check this. This is live, folks, so don't even worry about it. I'm not cutting this up for the longer show. This might be the clue for the one that's remaining. Let me just. No. That would have been Marc Gasol. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think once you hear who this player is, you'll be like, oh.
Okay, I have 2 guesses. One of them is really stupid. All right, I'm gonna guess Dwight Howard because he won a bunch of them, and maybe he didn't get on the. No, okay, you're shaking. You don't like that one. No. Marcus Camby. I don't know. That's my last guess.
Tyson Chandler was the other one.
Oh, I was in the neighborhood. Okay. Jeez. Well, that's a great question. Now I know how it feels, Dan. I don't like how this feels when you just don't know it.
To be fair, I botched the first clue. I was reading it and I wasn't processing it correctly. This is the last one because Rubik's Gal just sent this while we were recording. So I have no prior knowledge.
Okay, perfect.
Clue number 1. I was drafted 7th overall by the Timberwolves, but sent on draft night to the Bulls. Clue number 2. I was predominantly played as a stretch 4, but showed an improved all-around scoring game in the 2022-2023 season, making not only my first All-Star team, but also becoming the only player in NBA history to make 100 dunks and 200 threes in the same season.
Whoa. Okay. So this is a number 7 pick by the Wolves that ended up on Chicago and then did all that, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
I'm really bad at this. I don't like
Third
how
clue?
this feels. Go ahead.
You ready for the third clue?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hold the record for being the fastest player to 100 threes, having reached the landmark in 41 games.
Is this Markkanen?
Yeah, Larry, I was going to say, you're going to be punching yourself in the face.
Yeah, the Wolves thing threw me. I forgot about the draft night trade because that was the Butler deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was thank you so much, Rubiscal. That was great. And then I didn't have to come up with them. Fair warning, Rubiscal offered to send us like a shit ton of these every week. And I was like, please don't like go through the trouble of doing that. But those were absolutely great. Look, it's hard, right? You weren't on the receiving end of this yet.
It is. It's always, because when I'm sitting here looking at all the clues, I'm like, Jesus, Dan, figure it out. Like, this isn't hard.
Honestly, I thought the only one that I said that for, the Warriors one was tough, but you're like a Warriors guy.
Yeah, well,
I was surprised you didn't get. After I read the first,
so many teams that he played for that I was just, my head was spinning at that point. All right, I got. Let's see. I did my total points. Okay, I got kind of a trickier one for you, if you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready.
So there are 15 active players with 500 career blocks and 500 career threes. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to name them all.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 5 at a time, and one doesn't belong. So you're going to tell me who doesn't belong in the 500 blocks, 500 threes club. Okay. Starting with group number 1, LeBron, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Giannis, Al Horford. Who does not have 500 blocks and 500 threes?
LeBron, Kevin Durant, Al Horford. Who are the other two? Giannis?
Harden and Giannis.
It's got to be Harden.
It's Giannis.
Damn it.
Unbelievable. Harden has the blocks, but he does. Giannis, this is how unfair this is. He's got 494 threes. So just missed it. Okay. Next group. Brook Lopez, Karl Anthony Towns, Nikola Vucevic, Jaren Jackson Jr., Nicholas Batum.
Ooh.
Who does not have 500 blocks and 500 threes?
I'm going to say, just because I don't think he's played enough to do it, Triple J.
You got it. Very good.
Nice.
He doesn't have the threes. He's like 60 plus short. That was hard because Batum is just kind of sitting there like, what is this guy doing here? Next group, last group. Rudy Gay, Draymond Green, Jeff Green, Danny Green, Joel Embiid.
Danny Green definitely has it.
Correct.
He hasn't. I'm going to say Joel Embiid.
You're right. Joel Embiid does not belong. 2 out of 3. And that was like weirdly, obnoxiously tricky. So
if it's any consolation, I was down to Harden and Giannis. And I was like, did Giannis have enough threes for this? But
we would have had to scrap that idea if you had swept it. It's clearly too easy. Let's see. I have a couple who am I's, but if you got something you want to throw out there, I'm ready.
Why don't you finish yours up? And then I have a bunch of, they'll be quick ones.
Okay. I'm going to give you options here. Who am I? I went to Syracuse. Not going to help you. At least one former NBA player is in my immediate family. I averaged over 20 per game in 2020/21. I played for 5 teams. Those are your clues. Am I Glenn Robinson III, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jeremy Grant, or Gary Trent Jr.?
Jeremy Grant.
Very good. What was it? The Syracuse that got you?
No, it was the 20 points per game in 2020. Glenn Robinson III was like, all right, well,
he's out. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to find active guys or I guess, I don't know if GR3 is still active, but guys with immediate family members with NBA.
That's tough to come up with alternatives.
Not easy. Sure. All right. Last one I have for you. Another who am I? I've won an NCAA championship and an NBA championship. My draft scouting report from our own Jonathan Wasserman, BR's own Jonathan Wasserman from a couple of years ago. And I quote, isn't a dangerous enough one-on-one scorer or full-time point guard. Could eventually start as a 2, but his skill set, athleticism, and liveliness should be best suited as a 6th man or jack of all trades role player. He shot 39.7% from 3 last year. Okay. Am I Kyle Lowry, Dante DiVincenzo, Quinn Cook, or Danny Green? I'm just using Danny Green as often as possible.
Dante DiVincenzo.
Correct. You got it. That scouting report's really good, by the way.
That was a great scouting report. I will say, I wish I probably could have gotten the answer without the choices if I had any knowledge of college basketball whatsoever.
I know. That's why I always like to throw some. I don't have any either, but outside of like the mid 90s, which is when I paid attention to UCLA for some reason. But yeah, that one, the Quinn Cook gave you a throwaway there because I don't know who had a draft scouting report for him, but I think the real star again is Wasserman because that is still the Dante DiVincenzo scouting.
Yeah, that was spot on.
That is accurate. All right, you got some for me. That's all I have, I think, today.
These are ones without a definitive answer, but they're fun. Which NBA player will have the biggest impact on his new team this season? Bradley Beal, Jrue Holiday, Damian Lillard, or Fred VanVleet?
I think I'm going to go with Dame just because of how fundamentally he changes how this team is, how the Bucks are going to play offense. He's just a piece that they've never really had. So I think all those guys are going to make differences, but Dame like just alters how they're going to play, I think. So that would be my argument there.
And this will probably surprise people, but I think Fred VanVleet is the second most sensible answer here just because of the low baseline Houston
for sure
working off of. Same question. Which NBA player will have the biggest impact on his new team this season? Bruce Brown, Dante DiVincenzo, Max Strus, or Gabe Vincent?
I think it's got to be Strus. All we talked about all year was that the Cavs need a guy who can make open threes that defenses will respect. He can do that, and he can guard a little bit. So I think he is the piece that they needed. So unless something goes sideways, he's going to matter a ton.
I could see it being Gabe Vincent just because the Lakers need a 3-and-D type point guard. Those are hard to find. Gabe Vincent, in theory, can be it.
2 former Heat guys. Good job, Heat.
Which NBA player will have the biggest impact on his new team this season? Chris Paul, Jordan Poole, Kristaps Porzingis, or Marcus Smart?
I'm going to go Porzingis here because it could be a good or bad swing, I think. He gives them a type of player they haven't really had. The floor stretching could really matter. The, standstill rim protection could really matter. Or he could be hurt and they're suddenly not top tier contenders anymore.
I'm going to go Chris Paul just because there's the same element of what you said. It could be great or horrible. There's also the element of they might use his contract to trade for someone else who impacts their team.
Great thinking on that one.
Which NBA player will have the biggest impact on his new team this season? DeAndre Ayton, John Collins, Yusuf Nurkic, or Robert Williams III? 2 Blazers.
I'm going to go Nurkic. And I think it's because there's a chance that this really does not work because his finishing inside is so bad that could just, gum up and otherwise what probably still will be, but it could be a real offensive problem if he can't put the ball in the basket at close range.
I even think it's going to be DeAndre Ayton because the Blazers are about to set the single season record for post-ups in transition. Which, a little bit different, which NBA rookie drafted outside the top 10 in 2023 will have the best debut season? Grady Dick, Keontae George, Olivier Maxence Prosper, or Kaysen Wallace?
Give me Keontae George because I think there is a chance for him to seize a lot of minutes as a primary on-ball guy for the Jazz because I don't love anybody they have that's going to occupy that role. So he has at least the opportunity.
Mavs Moneyball's Kirk Henderson has me smitten with Omax, but I have to go with Keontae George too. I think he ends up having the biggest opportunity of the group here. Are you ready? This is my last little smorgasbord of options.
Okay.
Are you ready to guess the NBA Reddit player comparison?
so unready.
I thought this was a good idea, though. Let's see if I'm right. Which NBA player was called JaVale McGee with handles? Bam Adebayo, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Evan Mobley, or Jabari Smith Jr.?
Oh my God. I guess I'll say Jabari Smith Jr. I don't have a good explanation for why. I just don't like any of the other ones.
Yeah, it's Giannis, actually.
How is that JaVale McGee with handles? Okay, do better, Reddit.
Which NBA player was called Joe Johnson with a greener light? DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, Chris Middleton, or Jason Tatum?
Jesus. Who's got a greener light than Joe Johnson? This is impossible. I'm gonna say Jason Tatum. Why not?
The answer is James Harden.
What?
This is maybe, judging by your reactions, we won't make this a recurring series. Guess the NBA Reddit player comparison.
Okay.
Which NBA player was called Fashion Week Fultz, as in Markelle Fultz? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, DeJounte Murray, Ben Simmons, or Russell Westbrook?
Oh, so Simmons and SGA are the two that leap out. And I think you're not going to try to knock SGA because he's really good. I'm going to say Ben Simmons.
No. It was... Oh, no, it was.
Yeah.
No, it was... Oh, no, sorry. It was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Oh, what a roller coaster this was. Had a yes and a no.
Oh, I actually do have another one.
All right, I'm going to get this one.
It's not the one that you think it is. Don't worry.
Okay.
This is the final one. Which NBA player plays like Derrick Rose which NBA player plays like Russell Westbrook in Crisis? John Morant, Jaden Ivey, Scoot Henderson, or Derrick Rose? I'll throw you a bone. Derrick Rose is not the answer.
That's got to be Jaden Ivey.
That is correct.
Oh, finally, I'm on the board. Okay, that one made sense. That one made sense.
I messed up the options, so I apologize on that one. That was fun, though.
I needed the help. I needed you to trim the answer options from 4 to 3 to have a shot there.
Can you take us out of here? That was a long garbage stat padding segment.
Stat padding. Well, we padded a lot of stats. That's what you got to do. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks to everybody that submitted stat padding options. These are like
Killhouse and Rubik's Gal coming in clutch. Killhouse naming it, and Rubik's Gal. Those were great. Those were great.
Keep it coming. Almost stumping me with Omri Caspi. But you know what? If we get them all too easily, this isn't a good segment. So we got to fail a little bit. And I like to contribute by failing. Thanks everybody for contributing, for listening, for watching. Make sure, if you have not done so already, you are subscribed everywhere you can be. I have it on good authority that these podcasts now appear on Apple again. So check that out. Dan called Apple and got that sorted out. Really flexed on them. This is impressive. Follow us on all the socials. Those are on the screen here and listed in the YouTube and podcast description. Just tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody that we put out a great product filled with useful nuggets of information like we just did for the last 15 minutes where we just try to guess random bullshit. But there's also some analysis in there. And we'll close, as we always do, with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.